In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 language learning tips I have for anybody who is trying to learn a foreign language. So my background is that I was born and raised in the US, and my native language is English, but I started learning Japanese from scratch when I was 18, so basically an adult. In the span of around, I would say 2 to 3 years, I became what most people would consider fluent in the language. And it was a difficult couple of years. I had a lot of moments where I really struggled and wondered if I was ever going to actually learn this language to any meaningful level, but I did, and I learned a lot of important things in the process, so I'm going to share them here. Number 1 is to be obsessed with the language. I think this is by far the most important aspect of learning any language, more important than any specific advice like, use these textbooks or use these language learning methods. Before all of that comes your reason for learning the language. So in my case, I studied Japanese because I liked Japanese pop culture. I was obsessed with Japanese pop culture, and that's not necessarily a deep or meaningful reason to start learning a second language, but it was my reason, and it worked out for me because my obsession with this thing is what gave me the drive to keep on studying for years and years until I finally reached a level that I was happy with. And I would suggest that anybody else learning a language try to keep this in mind as well. If you're just learning a language because you have to do it for school or because you think it might provide you with good career opportunities in the future, those are things that might not keep you motivated in the long run. Those are more superficial motives, in my opinion, and that kind of motivation eventually fizzles out. But language learning is a long journey. It can take years to start seeing results, and unless you have some strong obsession with the language that you're learning, it's going to be an uphill battle. So whether you're studying Japanese or Korean or Spanish or French, if you have some reason to be obsessed with that language or the culture of the country where it's spoken, lean into that as much as you can. Take advantage, embrace it, even if it means being a total nerd and binge watching anime for days and weeks. Embrace all of that because it can end up being your biggest ally during the journey of language learning. Okay, tip number 2 is focus on input. Input is more important than output. When people study languages, they often worry about things like, I don't have any opportunities to speak the language. I don't have any friends I can practice with. I wouldn't worry so much about that. Practicing speaking, getting used to making mistakes and correcting those mistakes, that's important, of course, but much more important than that is input, because if you don't have any input, you can't produce any meaningful output. And as somebody who is studying a foreign language while living in a country where it isn't spoken, you have the ability to immerse yourself in that language using digital media, YouTube, radio shows, podcasts, Netflix, whatever. You can create an environment at home where you can listen to your target language all day long if you wanted to. And constantly having that input, practicing your listening abilities will, in this pretty mysterious way, kind of naturally carry over into your speaking abilities. I always say that there's a difference between learning a language and acquiring a language. Learning is when you consciously use, textbooks to study grammar or, consciously memorize vocabulary and then try to pull that vocabulary from your memory when you're, speaking. And it is good to do that, but that's different from acquiring a language, which is, when you have that language really just internalized into your brain, and when you try to speak that language, you don't have to think so consciously about every word that you're saying or every sentence that you're putting together. It just kind of comes out naturally. And the only way to acquire a language to that degree is to have tons and tons of input. People learn their native languages through many, many, many years of having input 24/7. And it's really not that different when you're learning a second language. And flashcards and textbooks are great. I think they're really, really good to use. as a supplement to your learning. They shouldn't be your main form of study. And lastly, tip number 3 is to create opportunities to use your language. Now, I know this sounds like it might contradict what I just said in the previous point about input being more important than output. But the reason I think this is important is not so much because, it'll give you opportunities to practice conversation. It's more because when you're learning a language, getting the chance to actually use that language to communicate is an incredibly fun and rewarding experience. The feeling when you've worked really hard to learn, and then you go to the country where it's used and you succeed in having meaningful conversations and connecting with the locals, that is one of the best feelings in the world. And experiencing that feeling, that high of like, I did it, I communicated, thanks to my own hard work, that is one of the things that will keep you motivated and excited to continue this long journey. That's kind of what I tried to do when I was studying Japanese, and I was still at a kind of intermediate level. It really was like the most exciting couple of years of my life, I think, just because of how frequently I experienced that sense of accomplishment. So yeah, those are just 3 of my tips from my own experience. I hope it was helpful and that you took something away.